G'day guys, M8T5 here, and today I'll be reviewing The Order 1886. So The Order 1886 is a supernatural third-person shooter that was developed by Ready at Dawn that is a PS4 exclusive. The game is set in an alternate London setting in 1886 that focuses on the ongoing war between the humans and half-breeds, which are essentially half-human, half-Lycan, which is a fancy word for werewolf. In this alternate universe, engineers have created technology far ahead of their time to give humans an advantage over the half-breeds, and a society known as the Order houses specially trained knights to fight the Lycans and keep the peace. You play as Sir Galahad, a knight of the Order that is tasked with keeping the peace and a slayer of Lycans, but of course this story is filled with politics, betrayals, revenge, rebellions, and a surprising amount of drama. Now as you can see, the Order is drop dead gorgeous. I mean, one of the best games I have ever seen, and it keeps up the cinematic look and feel throughout the entire game with no noticeable frame rate issues or visual hiccups of any kind. This is one of the closest experiences I've had to a movie experience in a game, besides other greats like The Last of Us or Heavy Rain, very cinematic games as well, but The Order brings the visuals with fantastic 18th century architecture, lifelike character models, props, and a breathtaking soundtrack. I also praise the direction of the story and characters that are brought to life with superb voice acting that resulted in believable and lifelike characters. All of this combines together to create one of the most cinematic video games ever.
Something's not right. Galahad, did you?
I saw it.
So what?
Half-breeds.
I really didn't think I would find this story interesting, since I myself am not really an 18th century werewolf kind of guy, but the characters are brought to life so well that I felt invested in the story. I do love how formal and respectable everyone is in this time period, using correct speech and pronunciation, and when somebody does swear, it has a certain impact to it. It is also very nice to see some strong female leads in the game.
You're joking. Is there a single woman in this city you won't try to seduce? Well, it's your problem now. Do try not to lag behind.
Unfortunately, the story overall is pretty cliche, filled with betrayals that are so obvious and predictable, it just falls flat in the end. But let's get to the most important aspect of the game, the third-person cover-based combat. I'm pleased to say that the combat in this game is solid and for the most part satisfying, as you will be fighting waves upon waves of rebels and general baddies throughout the game, as well as fighting Lycans every now and then. For the most part, you will be behind some sort of cover if you want to stay alive, and don't worry, there's plenty of it. Shifting between cover is easy with a touch of a button. You can also blind fire, look around or above cover to get a better sense of where the enemies are hiding, and then jump out for that perfect headshot. So the cover-based shooting is solid, but what really makes it a lot of fun is the unique weapons you'll be using. Sure, you will still have your standard weapons such as rifles, sniper rifles, shotguns, handguns, and assault rifles, but every now and then you get to utilize some unique weapons such as a gun that can shoot bolts of electricity, an assault rifle that can stun enemies by blasting compressed air at them, and most notably, the thermite rifle. The most original weapon in the game, the thermite rifle first fires magnesium rounds that create a mist that you then ignite with your secondary fire, that releases a kind of flare to burn your enemies from behind cover. It's a unique weapon and I loved using it. Besides this, most of the weapons are mostly ones we've seen before in other games, but at least in The Order they have some twists to them, and they are satisfying and fun to use. The battles are also more violent than I was expecting. Limbs can be blown off, some scenes in the game are pretty dark and gruesome that create a tense horror vibe, and those melee kills especially feel very bloody and personal, but overall adds to the experience. The only problem is all of the battles just feel the same. They are mostly just made up of cover-based shooting with waves and waves of enemies coming at you at once, and when they are all dead you move on to the next area and do the same thing again. Similar to when you fight Lycans, they attack you in the same way every time, and their attacks are easy to dodge, and by the end of the game you actually don't fight them that often, even though they are a major plot device, but for the most part they don't feel like it. The plot mostly focuses on politics and conspiracy conspiracies that occur between the Knights of the Round Table that Sir Galahad is trying to unravel, which is the most predictable and uninteresting part of the story. There is a time or two when you actually get to fight an Apex Lycan in a kind of boxing battle, but they are easy to play out and fully rely on QuickTime events to complete, which is the major problem of the Order. The gameplay relies too heavily on QuickTime sequences. You use them for pretty much every physical scene in the game. Even the very start of the game for the first 30 minutes or so is just a tutorial on QuickTime events, so I was very worried that it was going to be overused, and sadly it is. Now, I am not a hater of QuickTime events. For some sequences and really intense scenes, I think it can improve the experience, but when you have to use them for every single action you do throughout the entire game, it becomes less effective and tedious. I mean, the only time I personally really liked it is when you were sneaking around and you have to perfectly time a button press to get a perfect silent takedown, which to me was thrilling and satisfying. Something that also wore itself out was when you examine objects. At times you get the opportunity to rotate items in your hands to examine or admire them, and when I did this the first couple of times, it was cool and I liked it, but again, it is overused and is used for everything you pick up. Worst of all, sometimes it's just part of the story, so it forces you to stare at this object or weapon until the scene continues on its own. It's just slow and frustrating. Pacing is extremely slow for the first hour or two of the game. I swear there were only a couple of battles for you to take part in, more fights and gun battles increase over the course of the game, but it takes a while to get there. I also felt ripped off that the game is made up of 16 chapters, but at least 5 or more of them are actually just a cutscene and no player involvement is necessary. And that's the final bottom line. The Order is the most linear title I've played in a long time. There is no freedom, not much thought is needed for the player, just like a movie doesn't need any involvement from the viewer. The game chooses when it's an action or a stealth sequence, it chooses what weapons you have to use in that particular fight, and you never have any say in the matter. It also forces you to slow walk so much. This has got to be the most times I've been forced to slow walk in a game ever in my life, and it's just so frustrating. I just wanted to run. I mean, in games like The Last of Us, it works because it was used sparingly to give the viewer a beautiful and pinnacle scene to take in. Plus, you are still able to at least jog most of the time. In The Order, you are forced at a snail pace to walk all over, and it takes ages to get through areas, especially if you want to be thorough. But even that is unsatisfying, as there is nothing interesting to find in the larger areas of the game. The only collectibles you find are audio logs and pieces of uninteresting papers lying around the game. And to top it all off, it only took me around 6 to 7 hours to complete the game on normal, and the ending is terrible. It is not even an ending. It is a fade to black ending that doesn't resolve anything story-wise or give a satisfying conclusion to any of the characters. The Order 1886 is the most cinematic game I have ever played, and that is the game's major downfall: style over substance. The overused QuickTime events, the overused set pieces and combat sequences just made me question a lot. Because to be honest, I really enjoyed The Order. I really did. It was a fun ride with satisfying cover-based shooting with believable characters, but by the end of the game, I just thought to myself, is that really it? So finally, overall, The Order 1886 is a cinematic masterpiece with believable, likable characters, satisfying gunplay with some unique weapons, and even at times chilling and dark moments. But the game is just so linear, filled with overused QuickTime events, slow paced and slow walking, and a predictable short story length with no extra content, and that terrible ending. And since I don't see a sequel coming anytime soon, then that was not an ending at all. So I give The Order 1886 a 6.5 out of 10. I personally don't regret playing The Order 1886, and actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, but beautiful linear cinematic gameplay was chosen over original and creative gameplay, which is a huge shame because this game had huge potential that was just squandered. I recommend that you only get The Order when it is on sale. It is not worth the full price, but if you do manage to get it cheap, then you will not regret it, as it's still a cinematic masterpiece that just needed to get the player more involved in more ways than just QuickTime events. Don't forget to check out these other great titles that do cinematic gameplay justice. So for more video reviews and impressions of the latest titles and indie games, I hope to see you come back to M85 Reviews.